There's a particular kind of quiet in a courtroom before a judge speaks. Not peaceful. Charged. Like the air before a thunderstorm when everything has gone still, and you can feel the pressure changing but you can't yet see the clouds. I was sitting 3 rows back, jacket folded on the bench beside me. Paul Timmerman was on the witness stand. And across the room, at the defense table, Denise Kallman was about to hear her own words played back to her, in a room where they would be entered into the official record of the state. She hadn't looked at me yet. She would. Let me back up. Welcome to real-life verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. We're going to be here a while. My name is Chester. I'm 64 years old. I drive a 2005 Ford Ranger with 187,000 miles on it and a tailgate that doesn't latch right. There's a bungee cord in the bed. Has been for 4 years. I keep meaning to replace the latch. I haven't. My wife Margaret died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She had a garden out back. Tomatoes, peppers, some kind of climbing flower I could never remember the name of. I kept her tools in the garage. Still in the same spots. I don't garden, but I kept them. I spent 31 years running a commercial HVAC service company. Started with 1 van and a pager. Ended with 8 trucks and a crew of 12. 16 months ago, I sold it. Stayed on as a paid consultant for the transition, helping the new owner, a man named Paul Timmerman, get his footing. Keep the accounts. Keep the crew. I teach 2 afternoons a week at the county extension office. Biotech program, basic small engine repair for high school kids. I use the same diagnostic method I used running service calls for 3 decades. Start with what you know, eliminate what you can, and don't assume anything until you can see it. That method will matter later. When I sold the business, the question of what to do with the staff came up, specifically Denise Kallman. Denise had been my office manager for 9 years. She came on when we expanded to the 2nd location, and I needed someone who could handle payroll, vendor accounts, scheduling, and receivables without me standing over her shoulder. 9 years is a long time, long enough that I stopped double-checking her work, long enough that when Paul asked me whether he should keep her on, I didn't hesitate. She knew the systems, I told him. She knew the customers. She'd been there through the expansion, through the lean year in 2019, through everything. Keep her. She's solid. I said those words. Solid. I want you to remember I said that. The one thing I noticed, back then, a small thing, the kind of thing you file away without knowing why, was how Denise dated everything. Every page of notes from every meeting. Every printout she annotated. Every legal pad she ever filled at a conference table in my shop. Date in the upper right corner, underlined twice. Then her initials underneath. Not once. Not as a habit. Every single time. 9 years of paper with that same little marking at the top. I never thought much about it. I should have. April 18th. Last year. 7:15 in the evening. I was at my kitchen table eating reheated baked chicken and green beans. The kind of meal you make once and eat for 3 days, because you're only feeding 1 person and you stop seeing the point of cooking anything more elaborate than that. My phone rang. Martin Kowalczyk. Martin had done my book since 2006. He's 68 years old. He drives a burgundy Buick LeSabre that still has a cassette deck. Though I happen to know the deck stopped working 2 years ago, and the box of classical tapes in his glove compartment is more or less a memorial at this point. Martin is the kind of man who keeps things that don't work anymore because they meant something when they did. He called me at 7:15 on a Tuesday evening, which was not like Martin. Martin keeps office hours. He calls during office hours. I set down my fork. He told me there was a recurring transfer on the business operating account he didn't recognize. Same amount, same date, every month. Going back, he paused, and I heard paper shuffling. Going back to March of the previous year. 14 months. He asked if I'd set up a new vendor account I'd forgotten to mention. The LLC name didn't match anything he had on file. I want you to understand something about me. I don't panic. I didn't panic when my van broke down on the side of Route 9 in January of 1997 with a $1,000 service call waiting. I didn't panic in the hospital when the oncologist told Margaret and me what they'd found. I don't raise my voice. I don't slam things down. I think first. I act second. I told Martin I'd look into it and call him back. Then I sat there for a moment with the phone in my hand. I hadn't set up any new vendor accounts. I hadn't set up anything. I'd been a consultant for 16 months. I had no authority to move money in or out of that account. I ate the rest of my chicken. Then I went and got a legal pad. 3 days later, I drove 2 towns over to a coffee shop I'd never been to before and met a woman named Vivian Archer. Vivian came recommended by a friend from the Va-Tech program who'd used her in a divorce proceeding. She's 59. Her home office has a brass desk lamp with a green glass shade that belonged to her father. You notice things like that when you're sitting across a kitchen table from someone and you're watching them read your bank statements. She asked me 3 questions. What was the LLC name? How long have the transfers been running? Did I have a theory? I told her I had a name I wanted to rule out. I didn't tell her whose name it was. She told me it would take 4 to 6 weeks. She told me she'd trace the LLC through state business filings, identify the registered agent, cross-reference account ownership, and document every transfer with dates, amounts, routing details, and IP logs. She told me the price. I wrote her a check. I didn't tell Martin what I was doing. I didn't tell Paul. I drove home in the Ranger with the windows down. It was a Tuesday morning, cool enough that the heat wasn't on yet, and I had 43 miles of county road between me and my kitchen table to decide whether I was doing the right thing. By the time I got home, I had decided. I just didn't have everything I needed yet. 11 days after Martin's phone call at 6:40 in the morning, I parked my truck on the street outside the HVAC shop and watched the lot. I want to be precise about why I did this. I wasn't following anyone. I wasn't building a case in my own head to talk myself into something. I went to watch the person I suspected act normally in case it changed what I thought I knew. Denise pulled in at 6:52 in her Nissan Altima. Gas station coffee in the cup holder. She parked in the same spot she'd parked in for 9 years, second from the door, closest to the office entrance. She got out. One of my old techs, Roy, was unloading his van. She waved at him. Roy waved back. She went inside. She didn't scan the street. She didn't check behind her. She walked from her car to the door like someone who had never, not once, thought about whether someone might be watching. I drove home. I had one thing she hadn't accounted for. I wasn't ready to use it yet, but I knew it was there. Day 19. Vivian called. She'd traced the LLC to a registered agent in the same city. She gave me the address. I recognized it immediately. She said she needed 2 more weeks to confirm ownership through state filings and cross-reference the account signatures. I told her to keep going. I didn't tell her that she'd just confirmed what I already suspected. I thanked her and I hung up. Then I sat in the driveway of my house for about 4 minutes. The engine ticking as it cooled. The bungee cord in the back rattling a little when I'd come up the gravel. 14 months. Every month. The 12th. $4,200. Regular as a bill. I didn't say her name out loud. I just thought about 9 years of paper, each page dated in the upper right corner, underlined twice, initialed underneath. 9 years of it. All of it meticulous. All of it careful. Except for this one thing. I want you to stay with me here because this is where everything I thought I understood started to come apart and come back together at the same time. On day 24, I was at the extension office. I had a kid named Marcus working on a carburetor from a push mower, gunked up from sitting in a shed with old gas in the tank all winter. Standard. He was doing fine. Patient kid. Better with his hands than he thought. He asked me out of nowhere why people steal stuff if they know they'll get caught. I told him most people don't think they'll get caught. He asked why not. I thought about Denise waving at Roy. The gas station coffee. The same parking spot for 9 years. I said because they stop paying attention to what they're doing wrong and start paying attention to what they're getting away with. Marcus nodded like that made sense to him. He went back to the carburetor. I'd been patient for 3 weeks. I'd been watching and waiting and letting Vivian work, and I thought I was holding something in reserve. I had a thing, a significant thing, that she hadn't calculated for. But sitting there in that classroom, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for more evidence anymore. I was waiting to see if I'd have the nerve. I had the nerve. Day 33. Vivian came to my kitchen table with a brown accordion folder. 82 pages. Every transfer with a date, an amount, an account number, a routing trail, and an IP log. The LLC was registered in 3 separate state filings. Each one listed the same registered agent. Each one listed the same home address. Denise's home address. Vivian had highlighted the relevant sections in yellow. She is thorough. She is precise. She does not editorialize. But she did look at me when she set the folder on the table and say 2 words. It's complete. I put my hand on the folder. 82 pages of 14 months of $4,200, $58,800. I didn't open it that night. I already knew what was in it. I made a cup of coffee and sat in the kitchen until about 9:30. Margaret's garden was out there in the dark, the plot of it still visible in the moonlight, where the ground stays softer from all those years of tending. I looked at it for a while. Then I went to bed. Day 35. Martin Kowalczyk showed up on my front porch without calling first. He had a folder. He'd printed every transfer from the operating account, his own records independent of anything Vivian had compiled. He stood there in the porch light with his Casio calculator watch on his wrist and his folder under his arm, and he said, "I'll testify to whatever you need. I've known you long enough to know when someone's tried to rob you. I want you to understand something about that moment." Martin didn't ask me what I was going to do. He didn't ask me if I was sure, or if I considered all my options, or whether I wanted to talk it through. He stood on my porch at 9 in the evening with printed documentation and told me he was already in. He didn't hedge. He didn't wait to see which direction the wind was blowing. I told him I was going to file a complaint with the county prosecutor's office. He nodded. We stood on the porch for another minute without talking, which is something you can only do with someone you've known long enough to not need words for everything. Then he left. I watched the Buick back out of the drive. The cassette deck in that car has been broken for 2 years. He still keeps the tapes. Some things you hold on to. Now, here is what she didn't know. When I sold the business, I didn't just walk away. I retained an 18% equity stake, minority ownership, written into the sale agreement. That 18% gave me legal standing. If irregularities surfaced, I had the right to access financial records. I had the right to pursue civil recovery. I had standing in court that a stranger off the street would not have had. And I kept the same accountant. Martin had been doing my books since 2006. The consulting agreement I signed as part of the sale was a 2-year salaried contract with quarterly tax reporting requirements, which meant Martin wasn't just my old accountant, he was still, formally, reviewing the business operating account on a schedule. Every quarter, as required, as agreed, as documented in writing at the time of sale. The consulting agreement is what put Martin in front of those bank statements on April 18th. The equity stake is what gave me the right to walk into a prosecutor's office and say, "I have standing here. This is my case to bring." Denise had been watching Chester the consultant, the man who came in twice a week and answered questions and then drove home in his old truck. She had not been watching Chester the partial owner. Chester, the man whose accountant was still, by contract, reviewing the books. When Vivian delivered the final report and I asked her whether Denise had tried to cover her tracks, she said this, and I want you to hear exactly how she said it. She wasn't careful. She was comfortable. That's how we caught her. Comfortable. The parking spot. The gas station coffee. The wave to Roy. Comfortable. Day 43. 9 in the morning. I put on a clean shirt. I put Vivian's accordion folder under my arm. I drove downtown. The prosecutor's office is on the 3rd floor of the county building. There's a window at the end of the hall that looks out over the parking garage. I remember that because I stood there for a moment while the woman at the front desk went to find someone from the fraud division. Ordinary gray morning. Cars coming into the garage. People going to work. I was in there for 1 hour and 12 minutes. When I walked out, I had a case number and a business card with an investigator's name on it. I drove back across town, stopped at the gas station I always use, put in $14 of regular, got back in the Ranger. The tailgate didn't latch right on the way home either. Never does. Some things you just make work with what you have. 15 days later, 2 investigators showed up at Paul Timmerman's shop at 10:30 in the morning and asked to speak with him. Paul called me 20 minutes after that. He told me Denise was being escorted out. Then he said, "I kept her on because you said she was solid. I should have done my own audit." I told him it wasn't his fault, and I meant it. Paul trusted my judgment. I had trusted hers. The fault runs in one direction only, and it ends at Denise Kallman. 7 months later, I sat 3 rows back in courtroom 3 of the district courthouse with my jacket folded on the bench beside me. Paul Timmerman was on the witness stand. The prosecutor asked him whether Denise had given any indication at any point that she believed the transfers would go unnoticed. Paul looked at me for just a moment. Then he looked back at the prosecutor, and he said, "She told me. Chester's too old to care about this stuff anymore anyway. We were in a budget meeting. I'd questioned a line item. She explained it away. She seemed—" He paused. She seemed completely certain. "Chester's too old to care about this stuff anymore anyway." The words went into the court reporter's machine. They became part of the record of the state. I want you to understand something about hearing those words in that room. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt the particular stillness of watching something settle into its final shape. Like the last piece going into a puzzle you've been working on for 43 days in private, and then 7 months more. The prosecutor asked me to stand and confirm my presence. I stood. The judge looked at me. Then she looked at Denise. Denise's attorney stood. He argued for the plea. Partial restitution. Probation. No prior record, he said. Mitigating circumstances. A deal that would end the matter cleanly. The judge denied it. She cited the clarity of the evidence. She cited the duration of the offense. 14 months, she said, was not a lapse in judgment. She cited the fact that Chester retained a financial interest in the business and an ongoing relationship with the accountant who discovered the theft. She set a trial date. She ordered bond pending trial. She set restitution at $58,800 plus interest. Then she dismissed the hearing. I picked up my jacket. I did not look at Denise. I walked out. Martin was in the hallway. He fell in beside me without a word. We walked the length of that corridor together. At the elevator, he put his hand on my shoulder once. One pat. That was all. I drove home in the Ranger. The bungee cord rattled in the bed on the turn off the highway. The tailgate didn't latch. The gauge said I had just under a quarter tank. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment with the engine off. Margaret's garden had been quiet all winter. The ground was starting to soften. That climbing flower she grew. I looked it up last month. Morning glories. That's what they were. I sat there until the engine finished ticking. Then I went inside and made coffee. 31 years I built something, sold it honestly, stayed on to help. And Denise Kallman spent 14 months moving it out the back door, $4,200 at a time. Because she was comfortable, she stopped paying attention to what she was doing wrong. She started paying attention to what she was getting away with. Those two things are never the same for as long as you think they are.